The last is, who is our dream client? That dream client is truly your ideal client, the person that you want more and more and more to come to your agency. This is the person, that avatar, the persona that we are going to build all of our processes on. If you want to write working families that have 3+ policies, you might have to have creative hours. You might do scholarships. You might hire kids from the high school because that's their target market. All right. So I want to talk a little bit today about how we build a sales process. I feel like so many agencies we come into and they want to know, well, what's the sales process? What should we be doing? And we start talking about it and they say, well, we're actually looking for a quoting process. And in my opinion, a lot of agencies have how to quote. We get trained how to quote upfront. We get trained how to quote when you first get your license. But then we don't ever really get trained. How do we take that next step of really identifying a sales process? A sales process puts the customer, that prospect, at the heart and soul of everything that you do. We build it around what's best for them, not what's best for us. And we start looking at sales processes that agencies have. We find so much that sales process is actually built around what's easiest for the agency, not what's best for the client. And so we really want to identify the difference between a sales process, so you call it a quoting process. Sorry, it's been a long day here. When we start the process, we ask up a couple key questions because you can't build your process until you have some identified milestones that you need to deal with. So the first one is somebody calls in, so a lead's been generated. Where does it go? In a lot of agencies, maybe that's round robin. It goes to the next person in line. It goes to the next person available. It goes to one person. It goes to two people. It goes to no people. It should be identified who is available. Now, we believe, and this is controversial, but you should put your best leads in the hands of a closer. And when you put your best leads in the hands of a closer, the rest of it follows. I would say at the beginning of the day, if I'm the best closer, I get the first lead. If Steven's the next best closer, he gets the next lead in line. But the idea is you want to line your deck. Now, people can change in order. You might be saying, well, how do we ever get those people at the bottom to get better? Well, they need to make the most of the opportunities they have. And if they're truly committed to sales, they will. What often happens and what we're trying to really fight against is the idea that a lead calls in and it goes to voicemail. A lead calls in, we say we're going to call them back. We have to remember that what we do is sell insurance, which means you need to sell insurance when the caller calls in. It's not at our convenience. They can go online and get a quote anytime. They can call other agencies, get a quote right away. We have to identify that even if the person that is next in line is not available, we just start taking down information. I think that this is such a critical idea. Where do leads go? Now, some agencies have multiple offices and they try to keep it in their office and it gets all sorts of complicated. I don't even want to get into that. My goal is somebody calls in for insurance, we bet to go ahead and get them in the hands of somebody. And we actually found that I think it was about 23% of our secret shoppers get put to voicemail. Nobody's got time for that. Okay. We don't have time for that. Our next step that you have to figure out is who is your dream client and who do you turn away? Now, I think in a lot of agencies, we have the idea of who do we turn away, but we don't have the idea of who's our dream client. Who do we turn away often needs to be upped a little bit. So we believe in free tiers. We turn them away because they're just not a fit for our agency and we don't want to waste their time or our valuable time. Step 2 is they're conditional a fit. So they might be okay. There might be a few rough patches, but at the end of the day, we need to get manager approval or we need to make sure they're on EFT or they're only going to these companies. And if they fit, they're great. The last is, who is our dream client? That dream client is truly your ideal client, the person that you want more and more and more to come to your agency. This is the person, that avatar, the persona that we are going to build all of our processes on. If you want to write working families that have 3+ policies, you might have to have creative hours. You might do scholarships. You might hire kids from the high school because that's their target market. But when you know what you want, you build all of the things around it, around that dream client. That's something I think we don't do enough of, is we sort of just keep building processes around what's easiest for us. We don't think about that dream client. And ultimately, we want to make business easy, convenient, and fun for them. So after that, next step, you have to identify your core carriers. So the core carriers are really the people, your partners on the carrier side you want to place business with. And the reason I'm super passionate about this is I see so many agencies wasting time quoting and going down the bowels and the depths of everything of all these different companies. And that's not what we should be doing. We should be trying to support our core companies. Not because we need to find them the cheapest insurance, we need to find them the best insurance. The best goes into many different factors. Identify your core carriers and say, this is where we go first, second, and third if we only have to. If we're putting business with a carrier that, let's just say, is very inexpensive, what do you think happens next year? They get very expensive. If we put somebody with a company that is inexpensive but has terrible service, when you have to deal with them, what are you going to think? Or the client has a claim that doesn't get handled well. Guess what? You're going to have a lot more work. We need to identify more than just the physical price to make a decision on insurance. Next up is agency standards. So What are the things that you're going to put in every quote? And they're not negotiable. It's a take it or leave it situation. Now we have our standard of not going below this, and we have our ideal quote, which the ideal quote is we're going to quote with all these bells and whistles. It's going to be a standard quote. And some people could decline some of that, but we're not going below these amounts. We're not going below these coverages. And what you find then is that you'll find people selling value, not just the cheapest insurance. So agency standards are really, really important, as well as your ideal quote. Next up on your sales process, you must decide your turnaround time targets. So what this means is someone comes in to quote, we do strongly believe in quoting over the phone. I could talk about that till I was blue in the face, to be honest with you. In personal lines and small commercial, we really need to be quoting over the phone. People think it's impossible. It is not impossible. It's just different. And the journey to get from point A to point B can be fuzzy. Really what we want to be kind of dealing with is the turnaround time. So say you can't quote over the phone. You don't want to. Your agency doesn't believe in it. You don't like what I have to say. So you're going to keep doing what you're doing. And that's fine. I still love you very much. We need to identify a quote comes in, when is it coming back out? And the reason that we need to make sure that we have that information is simply because I've seen a lot of agents forward quotes, have a lot of quotes on their desk, but miss turnaround time. What we're doing instead is delaying a quote to a client, missing an opportunity, missing an expectation. And what ends up happening in those situations, unfortunately, is the client might go ahead and get a quote somewhere else and bind coverage, and we waste our time doing a quote. Where if we tell a client, you're going to get a quote by tomorrow, we have to do that. Now, if we can't, because we get so many new quotes in, we have to raise our hand. That is the idea behind turnaround times, and really getting passionate about seeking those turnaround times and having a plan if something goes out of variance, take it off the person's desk and move it to somebody who can help. We can't allow everybody to kind of dictate their own turnaround times, like quotes said. It's a waste of your resources, and it's a waste of that quote when it finally gets done, because we should be the best we're ever going to be in a sales process. And when we're not, you know what happens? People think, if I can't get a quote on time, am I going to get service on time? And the answer is that's a great question. Follow-up protocol. Another one that you need to set up right now is when you can't close it on that phone call, when you're delivering the quote, how many times are we following up? And this happens to be like so wild, all over the board. Every agency does it differently. And it's a problem. Sorry about the yawn there. It's a problem because I might be following up one way. Susie might be following another way. The agency owner wants it done another way. And honestly, a lot of times we just miss follow-ups because we get busy. The word I hate the most, busy. And I don't want to do that at all. So I want to instead say we do 3 follow-ups. You'll see in our blog, if you check it out, that we're doing 6 follow-ups as our recommendation. In our follow-up protocol, we actually have scripts, we have target times, and how to break up with a client. I think that if your team gets access to our sales training, either through our online school, by working with one of our consultants, that you'll see that the follow-up process, albeit overwhelming to make 6 calls, works. And number 2, that breakup really, really says a lot. We have to identify, and this is something that came up recently. We were doing a carrier training. And what ended up happening was some of the owners in the audience were giving us a lot of pushback. And they were like, well, Kelly, we're a service organization. So these sales strategies are quite over the top. And I was kind of chuckling just a tad bit because we cut it back a little bit. We watered it down. And I kept thinking, well, we're a service organization. Okay. How does that mean that you're going to take a service over a new piece of business? That's fine. That's your choice. It's a business owner. But why is it service versus sale? I had this big debate in my head. I kept thinking about it and thinking about it. I'm like, we have a service shop. So they must have 5 million 5-star reviews because they're a service shop. Their customers love them. But you look at some of the agency websites, they don't have that. But there really are a transaction shop with no direct leadership. But then you have, well, they're a sales shop, and it's like looked down upon, right? They're a sales shop. They just sell. Then I look and say, well, they have great new business growth. Maybe their retention's lower. They're growing. It's okay. They have some work to do on the service side. Neither one is right or wrong. And I kept thinking there's someplace in the middle. And why don't people talk about being just a growth shop? A growth shop is somebody who is really trying to grow their business. And if we have a growth shop, we'll be growing. In order for an agency to work, you have to service and you have to sell, and they need to be in equal components and make a customer feel amazing. But when I feel like it's so hard when we say we're a service shop, it's basically saying, well, why don't we shut our doors for any new business? Say we're not taking new clients. When we're a growth shop, is it that we just neglect every customer and they get called back 3 days later to add a vehicle? That's probably not great either. And I think some of these are very dramatic, but I think it's a little bit of how do we make it all work every day in and day out? And the idea is growth. So some of the ways that you would prioritize between service and sales would be thinking about the idea of vetting the clients. So a current customer needs help and they're a C client, and this new lead comes in, it looks like an A, take the A, which I know sounds a little sticky for people. If all things are the same, you'd ask each client, great, by when do you need the quote? By when do you need this? and find out what their timeline is. I find so often we don't actually have to prioritize service and sales. We just need a lot more communication at the end, and that works itself out. You really can't build your sales process until you nail down these items. So just to repeat them all again, it's where should new opportunities go? Who is your dream client so that we can clearly build our sales process around them? Who are the clients that we don't want to work with and we're going to turn down? And who are clients that will conditionally approve if they meet certain criteria like EFT, pay in full, certain carriers that we place them with, and identify those because upfront that needs to be baked into your sales process. Next up, who are those core carriers? So who are we trying to send business to? Who do we want to support? Who do we want to champion? Who does a good job for us? Who is fair pricing? Who's easy to work with claims? Who's going to give us the best client experience? That makes a big difference. Our next stop, then just to recap, is the agency standard. So we're not going to write coverage below this. Oh, but wait, here's our ideal quote. So if we have an ideal quote, this is what we're going to quote every single time with the bells and whistles in it and deliver. And if a client declines some of it, we'll get a declination form and move on, as long as it does go below our agency standard. Then we go into the turnaround times. How quickly are returning quotes? Are we quoting over the phone? What to do if you have too many quotes on your desk, and how do you raise your hand? And last up is our follow-up protocol. So how many times are we following up? Who are we following up with? And when does that work? So you start there. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what you're going to find in our blog, right? Because we have our blog, we have our sales process training. Love to work with you guys on sales training for your team. And this is all inbound sales training. So when the phone rings, what happens next? So the first thing that we have to figure out is reading the opportunity, getting it to the right sales agent. So that needs to be mapped out, scripted. What happens on the days you're short-staffed? What happens on Taco Tuesday? What happens on all the days, right? This is how you're going to route a lead. Then we have new opportunity greeting. And you can download in our blog our sales questions that we encourage agencies to use, but we don't want to go right into quote mode. We want to go into rapport building mode. So we have some pre-qualifying questions that people can use. So you want to add in 3 minutes of report building and qualifying. So this is just a chat with a new lead, getting to know them, developing that rapport, letting them learn about you, letting them learn about them, all of the above. So things like, how did you hear about us? Why are you shopping today? Other than price, how are you going to make your decision? We have a couple questions just to break the ice and understand what the logic is behind the client. If you dive into the quote, we're missing a lot of key sales information. Next up, find a common ground with the client. That's building rapport. Work, weekend, weathers, pets, kids, community. Find something that you have in common because people still buy from people they know, like, and trust, and that's important. Next step is we call the insurance interrogation. That's gathering the quoting information. I'll be upfront. We don't recommend you ask for deck pages unless you know they have them in front of them. I don't want them calling other agents. Most deck pages are wrong. Don't go off them. You can pull up the tax assessor or the website for the Zillow, so you can look at exactly what's going on in their home. Confirm information as opposed to ask it. And a lot of times we see agencies run a sales disablement model, which is, well, they don't have the husband's driver's license number. I can't quote it. You most certainly can. You can just say, I have an estimate. We need this information to finalize your quote. You can certainly do a quote with somebody with an estimated roof. You have to be sales enablement. You have to try to get the quote to them conditionally under these underwriting principles. But I find a lot of people want every I dotted, every T crossed, everything. And the problem that you're going to run into with that is that most people will not have that. You need to be about getting the quote in their hands so they're motivated to get you that information. That is sales enablement. The next step is earning the opportunity to quote all lines. And when you're building your sales process, you got to think about how are we going to get those other lines? We don't want to quote monoline. We don't want to quote small policies. Next up on your sales process that we're going to go over, if you take a look at our blog, quoting over the phone and setting expectations. We get a lot of pushback on quoting over the phone, but agencies who embrace it don't want to go back. So we might need to keep an open mind, learn about how to quote over the phone. Don't just shut it down, and you will find higher closing ratio, better vetted lead, no lag time, one and done. And once people see the value and they get over the awkwardness of it, they're like, I don't want to get off the phone. It's more work. We also believe a part of your sales process is providing people multiple options. It's a great sales strategy. Option A, option B. Amazing how many people spend a little bit more money on coverage because they see the value. When you give them one quote, it's take it or leave it. When it's option A or option B, it's which one would you prefer? And you can lean onto your close. We talk about presenting the quote. And this is where I really believe that agents have a lot of work to do. A lot of times they lean into, all right, I quoted your insurance, it's X. I'm like, you save the price a lot. You need to build value. And we're going to walk you through that in this blog. And last up is asking for the business. So we're at the end. It's awkward. We're ready to get off the phone. And a lot of times people say, I'll send you the quote so you can look at it. I say, no, don't do that. Instead, what you want to do is say, which option do you want to go with? Let's close the deal. Be a little aggressive, just a scooch aggressive, and you'll get a good result. And last up is follow-up. How do we follow up with people efficiently and effectively? So those are our steps and stages. We actually map this all out for you on our blog. So I hope you check it out. Your team needs a good sales process to follow. When you do that, everybody can replicate it over and over and over and over again. And that's our message to you today. Thanks so much, everybody.